what do you think would be the difference between a great season for Penn State like they had last year and actually being a playoff contender?
Did Penn State lose to Ohio State and Michigan last year?
Yes.
I knew the answer to that question. What is it going to be, or what has to happen in State College for them to get one of those? That's, to me, the number one thing. And I wonder if quarterback play is the difference there. Maybe it is. And like I said, like Trace McSorley and guys like that over the years, Penn State's had some sneaky good college players. But do they need a bona fide NFL draft pick, the likes of which we haven't seen since first-year Christian Hackenberg, to really get them over the hump? Because the one thing that I think is interesting is that Penn State plays Ohio State very tough every single year. I mean, I think they beat the spread every year, no matter what it is. But they can't get over the hump. And even the one time they did win in 2016, they lost a non-conference game. So, like, in order for Penn State to win the Big Ten or to get to the college football playoff in the 4-team iteration of it, they not only have to go 1-1 against Ohio State and Michigan, they also can't play grab ass with some of the other teams in the conference. And they can't drop games because, Penn State's been kind of prone at times to clunkers. So, I think that they have some really good offensive skill talent. I mean, if you go look at Nicholas Singleton and Dante Cephas at receiver and running back, that's a pretty good 1-2 punch if Drew Aller takes a step forward. Obviously, their defense has got a lot of dudes on there that can make some plays. I think they're returning a large portion of what they had last year. Is this a team that can actually beat Michigan or Ohio State once? Because, last year you said that they had a great season, and I know they won the Rose Bowl and did what they did, but like, are Penn State fans satisfied with losing both of those games every year? And if they're ever going to do it, if they're ever going to break through and get to the playoff in the 14 field, they were so close in 16. Can they actually win one of those two games and then not screw off a game that they shouldn't lose, or shouldn't lose to a team that isn't as good as them?
I understand, but I do think they had a great season. I get that there was all of that fan push and say, put Drew Aller in, right? Like, let's go to the future. But I also understand why James Franklin stuck with Sean Clifford. And again, I think the Rose Bowl, what we have seen from the Rose Bowl in an era where when it's not a CFP game, people have opted out. It's not been as big a deal. It has been a launching pad. Like, it has been a game that still validates something. And I think for Penn State to win the game the way that they did, the flashes that you saw from the freshmen in that game, plus, again, it's noteworthy that James Franklin beat a top 10 team. So this is what I believe the record is right now. I believe his personal record against top 10 teams is 3-20. And that's including the Utah game. It's not good.
And oh my God, that's worse than I thought it was.
It's, again, to your point, you're playing Michigan, you're playing Ohio State, you're playing these teams very regularly. And that has been a problem. We talk about this every single time they come out of one of those games about the gap that they need to close. I also think, going back to what we were just talking about, if you're shooting for Ohio State and then Michigan comes up and they're building and they're different, they're more physical, they're just kind of like pounding the ball more.
It's two different things. Yeah.
It becomes harder too. I am so curious to see how they play these games this year for all the reasons we have outlined. But I do think that's why obviously there's more hype around Florida State. They don't have divisions in the ACC this year. The path is clear for FSU to get to an ACC title game. You also don't have two teams like Michigan and Ohio State in the ACC. Like, Clemson's been down. They haven't been in the playoff the last 2 years. So there's opportunity there that Penn State has been blocked. And this was the Michigan problem too, when they were losing to Ohio State every year. You get blocked. You get blocked from the Big Ten championship game, which blocks you from the playoff. And that's what's really hard about any of these teams in the East, especially in this last year of a 4-team CFP. So I think it comes down to those big games, which I know is not, earth-shattering information, but I'm super fascinated to see Drew Aller. I'm super excited to see the young talent at so many different places for Penn State, because as you know, they recruit well, but then they have these clunkers. They have these games, or they don't live up to the expectations. But this year it's all aligning. Like,
yes, and I'm looking at their schedule right now. West Virginia, Saturday, September 2nd, is their opener. Then Delaware at Illinois, Iowa at Northwestern, and then UMass. And that gets them to almost the end of October. And I think that Iowa game, luckily, is at home, but that's just going to be a gross Big Ten game probably, because that's the way that Iowa plays. But if they can get to, 6-0, going into October 21st at Ohio State. I think that it's good that they actually have some time to build and gel. But 3-20 against top 10 teams is a really rough look. Now, the thing that I think is ironic about Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan here is that I think there's a really good chance going into the year that you could pencil in 2 of these teams for the college football playoff. But like, they are going to have to root for each other on a national scale to a certain extent. Like when Ohio State plays Notre Dame, like I'm sure Penn State would love to see Ohio State lose just because they don't like Ohio State. But you want to get rid of every single team from other conferences and divisions and whatever independents that you can to clear the way, because last year set up perfectly where they had to find 2 teams to fill out the last 4 or the last 2 spots in the 4-team field of the college football playoff. You want it to be as cleared out as possible at the end of the year. But yes, so you know this about me, I always buy into Texas. Okay. And it's a disease. It's a sickness. I got to go see a therapist about it. And the number one pushback I've had with Texas is, well, look at Sark. He's never won 10 games in his entire career. And it's been a 10-year sample, right? Can you apply that same logic and just go, I don't know if James Franklin has it? Because that, to me, is the scariest thing about this. And it's not too long ago before he got his God contract, and a large portion of the Penn State fan base was ready for a change. And I know that last year you think that it was a good year, and it was. They won the Rose Bowl. They beat a top 10 team. But how many years of losing to Ohio State and Michigan can Penn State stomach before it's just not good enough anymore, regardless of what happens the rest of the year?
No, and I agree with you, and I understand that for sure. I mean, I do think we were all a little surprised, right? Like it felt like maybe that year where he did sign that extension was a year that was like a good, like, breakup point, right?
Yes.
You know, like
not 10 years of guaranteed money. Yeah.
Every time USC would open, it'd be like, that could be a spot. But understanding all of that, I still am interested to see how this all shakes down. And again, some of that has been, they have been the underdogs in those games. Some of it's been questionable play calling. Like some of it's been decisions that James Franklin himself has made. Mm-hmm. Like there have been a lot of different reasons.
There's been a lot of head scratchers with that guy sometimes.
Absolutely.